Hello, AP. So today we're going to talk about cadences. So perhaps you've heard me mention the word cadence before. So what is a cadence? A cadence is the chord progression at the end of a phrase. You should know that a phrase is a complete musical thought. Some people consider cadences to be like musical punctuation marks. They create types of endings. So let's delve into the world of cadences. Think of a world without true sentences or punctuation that would go on and on and on without ever taking a break and never exactly knowing where you are going until you finally get there, but you did not really, and suddenly you are talking about goat cheese and milk with a little piece of silver metal surrounding it on top of the Empire State Building and flying a pig backwards through an elevator. Imagine music that you never were quite sure would come to an end, and you'll appreciate the world of cadences. A cadence is the end of a phrase. It culminates a musical idea or provides means for continuing it. If music were words, cadences would be the punctuation. In the end, a cadence is simply a certain chord progression that creates an effect. There are four main types of cadences. The first and the most common and strongest of cadences is the authentic cadence that makes you arrive at a final point as strongly as possible. Note to the right-hand side we have the Roman numerals 5-1 for major and minor. That's a very strong cadence because we have the dominant going to the tonic. The authentic cadence is the strongest and most conclusive of all cadences. It's like a period or exclamation point at the end of a sentence, and you know you've come to an end. There are two types of authentic cadences. The first one is called a perfect authentic cadence. We're going to abbreviate the perfect authentic cadence as PAC. The second type of authentic cadence is called the imperfect authentic cadence, abbreviated IAC. For the perfect authentic cadence, a few things must happen. Both the 5 chord and the 1 chord are in root position. And the soprano ends on do, or tonic. For the imperfect authentic cadence, or IAC, either the 5 or the 1 or both chords can be an inversion. That and or the soprano does not end on do. The imperfect authentic cadence is not as conclusive as the PAC. And imperfect authentic cadences are not as common as perfect ones, but they're very useful. Let's page up to talk about the next cadence. The Plagal Cadence. Note the Roman numerals for the Plagal Cadence. We have a major 4 to a major 1, or a minor 4 to a minor 1. This cadence, the Plagal Cadence, is not as strong as the authentic cadence, though it gives a nice resolution to a progression. It's almost like a sigh. I know that whenever I hear a Plagal Cadence, a warm, fuzzy feeling passes through my soul. Often, in church or sacred music, the Plagal Cadence is used on the word Amen, making it very easy to identify, almost being modal. So let's quickly recap on the authentic cadence. That's a 5-1. There's two types, perfect authentic cadence, imperfect authentic cadence. A perfect authentic cadence is where you have both the 5 chord and the 1 chord in root position and the soprano ends on do or tonic. The imperfect authentic cadence is when you have either the 5 or the 1 chord or both in inversion, or the soprano does not end on do. And in the Plagal Cadence, we're going from the progression of a 4 to a 1. Next up is the Half Cadence. Yes, the Half Cadence. It's going to end on 5. It is the most evil of all cadences. The half cadence leaves you wanting more. Composers use it to tease you. Composers use it to pull you in. Composers use it to just make you want to keep on listening, as the tension is there, but the resolution isn't. Remember, the 5 chord always needs to resolve somewhere. But composers decide to end it with just the 5 chord. And that's why we call it the half cadence. Now, it's recommended that you not use the half cadence at the end of your piece of music if you were to compose one, if you don't want tomatoes thrown at you. And our 4th type of cadence is the Deceptive Cadence. Note the Roman numerals for a Deceptive Cadence. We have the 5 going to the 6 in minor or major. In the Deceptive Cadence, it's almost as evil as the half cadence. But the Deceptive Cadence makes you think an end is near and an authentic cadence is on the way. You hear this 5 chord and you think it's going to go to 1, but instead it deceives us all and goes from 5 to 6. At the last possible moment and second, bam, you're hit with a 6 chord. It's not conclusive at all, but it works. And it may occasionally drive listeners a little bit crazy. I bet you never realized that composers had so much power to control your mind when listening to their music, huh? So let's go on to listen to some types of cadences. So I want you to listen to this example, and I want you to notice how the phrase does not sound over until the final 1 chord is sounded. So if we look quickly at our key, we're in D major. If I skim through the Roman numerals, I can see that I have a 5-1. And then after that, I have a 7th chord in inversion. That's the 2-4-3. And the half notes that are in that measure the E and the G, carry over to the next chord, making it a 5-7 chord going to 1. You should note too that the authentic cadence I mentioned before is the progression 5 to 1, but it could also be 5-7 to 1. So it can be a 7th chord in root position as well for a perfect authentic. So listen to this example. Here's D major, and follow along and listen. So the final 5-1 chord progression is what we call a cadence, and we already know that a cadence is a combination of a certain strong harmonic progression with a resolution to a strong beat that ends a phrase. Cadences might be thought of as punctuation marks in music. Some sound final, and others only pause a moment, and still others leave the listener waiting for more. Cadences are easy to hear, but are sometimes harder to recognize in printed music. So it's really important that you listen to the musical examples and recognize these musical punctuations. So my question is, what type of cadence do we have here in this listening example? Let's listen again and follow the music. Right here at the end is our cadence, and we have a 5-7 to a 1 chord, both in root position, and the soprano ends on tonic. Therefore, this example is a perfect authentic cadence. Just a quick recap of the authentic cadence. It's the strongest type. There are 2 types. There's the PAC and the IAC. And the above example had a harmonic progression of 5-1 or an added 7th, 5-7-1. Both chords were in root position, and the melody must end on the tonic pitch in the soprano. And there's our T-do right there. All of these strict requirements make this the strongest and most final sounding of all cadences. You may think of it as a final period at the end of a paragraph or an exclamation point. A perfect authentic cadence is usually found at the end of works and often at the end of significant sections in music. Let's take a look at this perfect authentic cadence. I'm in the key of C major. I have a 4, major 4, to a major 5, to a major 1, all in root position. So here's my 4-5-1 chord progression. Listen again. So this example I just played is a perfect authentic cadence because the soprano resolves to do, right there. We have root position 5 chord, resolving to a root position 1 chord, right there. So that is a perfect authentic cadence. Okay, in an imperfect authentic cadence, the only requirement is that the harmonic progression must be 5-1, or 5-7-1, or even 7 diminished to 1, or with added sevenths on the 5 or 7th chords. The chords may be inverted, and the melody may end on a pitch other than tonic. Because of the more general nature of the IAC, it sounds less final, but it's still strong enough to be used at minor stopping points in a work when the composer wishes the music to cadence, but then go on. Musically, the imperfect authentic cadence functions like a period at the end of a sentence. So here's an example of an imperfect authentic cadence. Listen again. That's the 4 chord. Next one up is a 5-6-4, going to a 1 in root position. So, does the soprano resolve to tonic? Yes, it does. However, the root position 5 chord does not exist. It's a 5 chord in inversion. Although we have a root position tonic, we cannot call this a perfect authentic because it's not 5-1, it's 5-6-4 to 1. So that's an example of imperfect. Let's examine another example of an imperfect authentic cadence. C major, I have a major 4 to a 7 diminished 6 to a 1. Right away you can probably tell it's going to be imperfect simply because we do not have a root position for a 7 diminished chord. So listen. Here it is again. In this particular case, the soprano does not resolve to tonic. It resolves to the mediant, or scale degree 3 of the tonic chord. So that's why there's an X through that one. And we do not have a root position 5 or a root position, in this case, 7 chord. So that is an example of an imperfect authentic cadence. Let's move on to the deceptive cadence. Let's review quickly about deceptive cadences. When a 5 chord does not resolve up by 4th to a 1 chord, but instead resolves up by a 2nd to a 6, we call it a deceptive cadence, abbreviated DC. Because a 6 chord and a 1 chord have 2 notes in common, this cadence is not nearly as conclusive or final as an authentic cadence, and is never used to end a tonal work. However, it does provide a delightful surprise by resolving to a minor chord in major keys, and a major chord in minor keys. Remember, we have the 5 to the 6, or the 5 to the 6 for deceptive. In a deceptive cadence, the 6th chord is not used in first inversion. This is because of the similarity to the 1 chord. It will sound like a wrong note 1 chord rather than a 6 chord. So let's do some examples of deceptive cadence. Here's one at the top, key of D major. I have a 5-7 going to a root position minor 6. So let's listen to this 7th chord. That's a nice dominant 7th in the key of D major. And when we want it to go here, to make it authentic, instead it deceives us as we go from 5-7 to 6 instead of 5-7 to tonic. Listen. Listen to it again. So the bass motion for this deceptive cadence is a sol-la or sol-lay type of feel from major or minor. Listen. And that is deceptive. Then there's the half cadence, which ends on 5 and is perhaps most like a comma because it cannot end a phrase. The unstableness of the dominant chord sets up the following phrase. In a half cadence, abbreviated HC, the 5 chord may be preceded by any other chord. The chord that follows a half cadence may be any chord. However, 1 or 6 are most common. So in this example, I'm in the key of B flat major. Let's listen to this chord progression. I have a 1 chord to a 4 chord in root position, to a 1-6-4 chord, to a 5 chord, and I stop on the 5 chord. Now look at the second inversion chord here, triad. I have an F in the alto and bass, which is 2 beats. That only means that we're carrying those notes through to the 5 chord. So that the 5 chord in the bass would be F, and in the alto would be F. So let's listen to this. Listen again. Hopefully you hear that we are on the 5 chord and we really need to resolve to, but we don't. And that's why the half cadence ends on 5 and sounds like a comma, because it can't really end a phrase. Let's listen to it one last time. Okay, another specific but rarer type of half cadence, which you should definitely know, is the Phrygian half cadence. The Phrygian half cadence is a 4-6, minor 4-6 to a 5 chord, and was popular during the Baroque period. Now, Phrygian half cadences only occur in minor keys and must consist of a first inversion 4 chord that resolves to a root position 5 or 5-7. So it's very specific. Now, if you think of that for a moment, if we're in the key of C minor and we have a minor 4-6 chord, we're going to have an A flat in the bass. And then we would resolve it to a 5 chord, which would be a G in the bass. So it's called the Phrygian half cadence because of that half step motion. The solfege would be lay, sol for the chord progression of a Phrygian half cadence for the bass line. The Phrygian half cadence refers to a common type of cadence that was used in music written in the Phrygian mode, but was later frequently used to end the slow middle movement of a concerto, when the composer wished for the final movement to begin without an extended break. The second movement of Bach's Brandenburg Concerto No. 2 is perhaps one of the shortest, complete movements in the literature and consists only of a Phrygian cadence. And here is an example of a Phrygian cadence in the key of F minor. If you look at the bass clef, you can see that I have a minor 4-6 going to a 5. And that bass motion is lay to sol. Creating a Phrygian half cadence. So the Phrygian half cadence is very strict. It must be in a minor key, and it has to be a minor 4-6 to a 5 chord. You may come across that. And now we're on to the Plagal Cadence. The Plagal Cadence, which we now know is 4-1, is actually a regression. Now, that's a new term. Regression is the opposite of progression. For example, usually we start out on a 1 chord and we can travel to a 4 chord, which is a great harmonic progression. But for Plagal cadences, it's going to be a 4, to a 1. Okay, for plagal cadences, we go through continual and prominent use by composers over the centuries. It has become a common, conclusive cadence. This is the Amen cadence used at the end of most church hymns. So let's listen to the key of D major. And I have a 4 chord to a 1 chord. The bass motion is going to be Fa, Do. Listen. And all the voices together. And that's a plagal cadence. It's important to know that plagal cadences do not have to resolve to root position. For example, we can go from a 4 chord to a first chord in inversion, like this. Or this. But more often than not, you'll see a plagal cadence in root position 4 to 1. Let's talk about cadences in musical practice. As mentioned, cadences are usually quite easy to recognize when heard. In common practice music, cadences occur at regular intervals, usually every 4 to 8 measures, but in slower works may occur more frequently. Notice also that not every 5-1, for example, is a cadence. A cadence is both harmonic and melodic, occurring at important points in the music. Listen to the following example to hear how a variety of cadences are used to bring the music to a regular ebb and flow, and how the type of cadence can lead the listener to expect what is to follow. So in this example, are we in the key of G major or E minor? Hopefully you said G major because we have the starting chord and the ending chord as a G major triad. There are 5 places in this music where we have cadences. At the fermatas, the red fermata, the yellow fermata, the green and the blue, and also in the last measure, the orange. So it is our job to, with our ears, be able to identify the cadence, and with our eyes, be able to identify the cadence, the 5 different cadences that exist in this harmonic progression. So I will establish tonic. And I do want to point something out in the second to last measure. The notes I'm about to circle are not part of the triad. So we're going to ignore those 2 notes for now, as we listen and as we watch to try to identify each cadence point in this harmonic progression. Here is the progression. Let's take a listen and follow along. Now I'm going to stop at each cadence along the harmonic progression, and we will discuss our answers. So your possible choices included PAC, IAC, DC, HC, or PC for the different types of cadences. That's perfect authentic, imperfect authentic, deceptive, half, or plagal. So listen to the progression again when I get to the first fermata, the red example, we will stop and see how you did. Hopefully your answer was an imperfect authentic cadence. It does sound like it resolves on a tonic chord. However, it's imperfect because the soprano is not singing do. It's authentic cadence because we have root position, but it's not perfect authentic simply because the soprano does not resolve to the tonic on the one chord. All right, so I'm going to start at the beginning again, and I'll meet you at the second fermata, and we'll stop and pause and check your answer. And there is our half cadence. Remember, the half cadence leaves you wanting more. It does not sound like it's a good resolution. It's a comma, perhaps. And if you look at the music, you can see clearly that it is the 5 chord. So there's our half cadence. I'll start the progression again from the beginning, and this time I will meet you at the green one, or the third fermata, to check our answer. Hopefully you put the Deceptive Cadence. That was a little bit evil, okay? You think the end is near and that an authentic cadence is on the way, but suddenly at the last possible moment, bam, you're hit with that 6 chord. It's not conclusive at all, but it works. Did it drive you crazy? So let's listen again. Now I'm going to start just at the beginning of the second system and stop at the Deceptive Cadence. There's our 6 chord. We're going from a 5 to a 6. Now, I could play it for you so that you can hear an authentic cadence, so you can hear the difference. Let me start at the second system again. But deceptive is this. Okay, I'm going to start the harmonic progression from the beginning, and I'll meet you at the 4th fermata, or the blue example, and we'll see how you did. And hopefully you realized it was a perfect authentic cadence. Why? Well, if you look at the chords, we have a 5-to-1 root position, and we have the soprano ending on tonic of the 1 chord. Now I'm going to meet you at the very end, in the last measure, and we'll see how you did. Let me take it from the beginning. This harmonic progression ends with a Plagal Cadence. That's 4-to-1, sounding like Amen. In the bass, Fa, Do. Now what we'll do is pick a voice part and sing it using solfege. Okay, so the notes I circled in the second line, in the second to last measure, by the way, those are called non-chord tones, which we'll be studying pretty soon. But since they are written in the alto voice, if you pick that voice part to sing, we can certainly sing the non-chord tones as well. Okay, so pick a voice part from bass up. Here are your notes: Do, Mi, Sol, Do. And let's sing it together. 1, 2, 3. And let's sing it one more time, switching a voice part. Try something completely out of the ordinary that you wouldn't normally sing, in your range, of course. 1, 2, 3. Thanks for watching, AP. Have a great day and study up on those cadences.